Okay, so we are going to talk about ISEE sentence completions. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to read over the sentence without looking at the answer choices. And you're going to look for clues that give you an idea of what the best answer choice is going to be. All right. So we're going to do a few of these together and point out a couple strategies. All right, so the ballet dancers performed with a grace and blank that left the audience breathless. Okay, these are great ones. So there are certain words that are consistency words, like and, also additionally, likewise. So all of those words would be consistency words. So this is very, very clearly telling us that we want a fill-in-the-blank word that would be a word that's consistent with the word grace, and that could be used to describe ballet dancers that leave the audience breathless. So I'm going to come up with a word or two or a phrase that's going to logically complete the sentence. Now, I actually don't need to get fancy and try to come up with some, incredible vocabulary word. I can just basically know that it's going to be a word that's similar to graceful. So now I'm going to look at the answer choices and see if I can find a word that means graceful. Um, Actually, now that I think of it, this is a noun. It's grace, and so this is also going to be a noun. So I'm going to be looking for a word that means grace or sophistication or elegance or something like that. So then I'm going to, it's easier to 100% sure or 99% sure eliminate bad choices than it is to 100% sure know the right choice. So it's definitely not hilarity. Let's say you're not sure what ineptitude means. It doesn't seem to be reserve. Elegance definitely works. So let's say you weren't sure what ineptitude meant. Um, you have a reason that elegance works. You don't have any reason for or against ineptitude. So since you have a reason for, letter C, then that's the one that you pick. But if we had reasons against all other three, and ineptitude, we didn't have any reason for it or against it, then we would pick ineptitude. Okay, I think that makes enough sense. So we touched upon a couple things. One is before you look at the answer choices, read over the sentence, look for clues that dictate what the word is going to be. The best kinds of words, most helpful kinds of words are consistency words like and or likewise or similarly or in addition. And then you also have contrast words like despite or although. Okay, so let's do another consistency word. All right, so this one seems somewhat consistent. Okay, so let's cross off the answer choices. So we have the puppy was blank to discipline and whined when reprimanded by its new owner. Okay, so even if you weren't sure what the word reprimanded meant, we know that the puppy is whining, and this word is a consistency word and. So a puppy that whines would be what to discipline? They would be, either embarrassed by discipline or immune to discipline or something like that. So it's going to be a word that means not responding positively to discipline. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices and start off by eliminating bad answer choices. Also, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be either a negative kind of word or a neutral word. It's definitely not going to be a positive word like influenced or receptive to discipline. It's definitely not going to be positive. So anxious to discipline doesn't seem very good because just anxious to discipline doesn't make sense as a phrase. Unaccustomed to discipline, that seems okay. Because if you are unaccustomed to discipline, you might whine when your owner reprimands or kind of punishes you. So that's a maybe. Anxious is a no. Now, this is actually something that is important. Once you have an answer choice that works fairly well, like unaccustomed works okay, then that's your measuring stick. And so you can eliminate, even though anxious is okay, not great, it's definitely not better than unaccustomed, and so it's out. Jovial, let's say you weren't sure what jovial meant, I'm going to leave it alone. Or, and then the puppy was used to discipline and whined when reprimanded by its owner. Well, the used to discipline is possible, but what's more likely, that a puppy that whines when it's reprimanded would be unaccustomed to discipline or used to discipline? Well, if it's used to discipline, it probably wouldn't whine. It would just accept it or deal with it. But unaccustomed definitely works. So unaccustomed is a better choice than used to. And if you didn't know what jovial means, you don't have any reason for it against it, so you clearly pick letter B. Jovial actually is a positive word meaning happy or joyful. Okay, so now let's go on to a couple contrast words like despite or although. And let's do although first because this is a single answer or one word fill in the blank. Okay. Although, whoops, way too thick. Although Angela was an interior decorator, her home was blank decorated. Well, this is a contrast word. So what would you expect of the decoration of the home of someone who works professionally as an interior decorator? You would expect that it would be very well decorated. I don't need to come up with a fancy word, but this is a contrast. So what's the opposite of very well decorated? Very poorly decorated. So I'm looking for, and also I know that it's going to be a word that would describe how something is decorated, so it's probably going to be an adverb like poorly. Okay, so, and it's definitely going to be a negative word. Sufficiently doesn't work. Sufficiently is neutral or positive. It's definitely not impressively, because that's very positive. Amply would mean having enough of something, so that doesn't work. Let's say you didn't know what it meant. You wouldn't have any reason for it against it. If you know that ample means enough of something, you realize that it's not good. And then modestly, modestly definitely works because modest means not very great. And so something that is like if a person has a modest opinion of themselves, they don't have a very strong or very great opinion of themselves. So modestly is neutral, and all the other words are positive. So the only one that works here is modestly. Okay, so also I recommend in the beginning, I haven't mentioned this yet, I recommend in the beginning when you're practicing to underline the clues when you spot the clues. So in this case, I'm highlighting the clues in the sentence. Maybe when you take the official test, you're not going to underline them, but in the beginning, practicing, it will help you zero in on the clues. And you might actually find that that really helps you, and then if it really helps you, certainly you want to do it on the actual test. Okay, So now we're going to be dealing with a double answer choice. So we have a first answer choice in green, and then we have a second answer choice in blue. So you're going to treat these just like we've treated the other ones. We're going to be looking for clues, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with whichever blank we feel more confident with. Because we can, for the one that we feel more confident with, we can eliminate some bad choices. Okay, and if one part of the pair is wrong, then the whole thing is wrong. So we're not looking for, we need an answer choice where both answer choices, the first and the second, work. Okay, so despite, contrast word, his blank beginnings as the son of a minor tribal chieftain, the warrior became one of the greatest blank in Asia. Okay, well, I'm more confident that this word is going to be, so what would be true of a positive thing of a warrior becoming a great blank in Asia, even if he started off as the son of a minor chief? Well, it might be rulers or emperors or military leaders or something like that. So let's look at the second answer choices and see if there are any good choices, bad choices, or neutral choices. So one of the greatest rulers in Asia, that one definitely works. One of the greatest leaders in Asia, that one actually works. One of the greatest monarchs in Asia, maybe. If you didn't know that monarch means king, then it would be hard. And basically, kings and monarchs means the same thing. So if there was only one answer choice, we would actually be pretty confident that it couldn't be monarchs or kings because they mean the same thing. So when you have a single answer choice, if there are more than one word that means the same thing, that's highly unlikely going to be the right answer because you wouldn't know how to distinguish between the two. But in this case, since it's a double answer choice, it possibly could be either of these. But I think that rulers or leaders is better than monarchs or kings because usually in Asia you don't think of kings of Asia or monarchs of Asia. You think of emperors or something like that. Okay, so in that case, it actually, looking at the one that I felt more confident with, didn't really help me eliminate anyone's, even though I'm leaning towards A or B. Okay, so now let's look at the first choice. So despite his blank beginnings as the son of a minor tribal chieftain, so in contrast to that, he became one of the greatest leaders, rulers, kings in Asia. Well, if we're contrasting becoming a great ruler or leader in Asia, then you might say, despite his simple beginnings, or humble beginnings, or low beginnings, or unimpressive beginnings. So it's going to be a negative word or a neutral word that would describe the beginnings of a person who is unlikely to become a great ruler. So it's definitely humble works. Luxurious is a positive word. It definitely doesn't work. Innocent is a positive word, and it also really doesn't have to do with a contrasting with becoming a great leader, so that one's out. And then let's say you didn't know what regal was. Well, you have a reason in favor of humble, and you have no reason for or against regal. And you liked the choice of rulers more than we liked the choice of kings, and so you would clearly pick A. Actually, the word regal means like a king, and it would be a word that doesn't fit here. Okay, so we've done those 4. Let's do a couple more. Okay, actually all 3 of these are double choices. Okay, so the recent forest fire, which blank the mountains of Indonesia, was the most severe blank disaster the region has ever experienced. Well, I'm more confident about this word. It's going to be a word that describes a kind of disaster that would be caused by a forest fire. So it might be a word like natural disaster. Um, it could be, it'd probably be overkill to say a most severe, very bad disaster, but it's going to be a word that would describe it's going to be an adjective for sure because it's describing disaster, and it's going to be something that fits along with the most severe either natural disaster or possibly destructive disaster. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices for the second word and see which ones fit. Okay. Um, Inflammable, let's say you weren't sure what it meant. Um, we'll just leave that one alone. Most severe environmental disaster, that one definitely works. Most severe intangible, let's say you didn't know what intangible meant, you could leave it alone. And most severe scientific disaster, well, again, this is my measuring stick. Environmental disaster works pretty well. Scientific definitely doesn't work better than environmental, so this whole thing is out. Okay, so I'm just going to pretend that I don't know what inflammable or intangible mean, and so then I'm going to go to the first choices. Okay, so a forest fire does something to the mountains of Indonesia. Well, I know that it's going to be a verb, and so it's going to be a word like destroyed. So a forest fire, which was a severe disaster, might destroy the mountains of Indonesia or burn the mountains of Indonesia. So destroyed works, devastated actually works, singed doesn't work because forest fires would do more than singed. Okay, so let's say this was our situation. We have a reason that works for B, the first choice, and B, the second choice. And if you weren't sure about what inflammable means, you would still pick B because we have 2 reasons for the first and the second. But the word inflammable actually means something that can catch fire, and the word intangible means something that can't be touched, so neither of those actually worked. So definitely the only correct answer is B. Okay, on to the next one. Both of these are actually interesting because even though we might not know exactly what both of these words are going to be, based on the clues in the sentence, we actually know something about how these words are going to be related. Okay, so normally blank, Jenny lacked her usual blank when I called her and invited her to a movie. Well, I'm not sure what either word is going to be, but I know that they're going to be inconsistent. And so, for example, if this word was friendly, normally friendly, Jenny lacked her usual kindness. Actually, now that I think of it, these words are actually going to be somewhat similar because it's going to be normally one way, but this time lacking their normal blank. So now that I think of it, actually both words are going to be similar. So, for example, you could say normally friendly, Jenny lacked her usual friendliness. Okay, so I'm looking for 2 words that are going to be adjectives that describe a person that are going to be consistent. So absurd and severe are definitely not contrasts. So that one's out. Scornful and predilection, well, you probably don't know what predilection means, so let's just leave it alone. Amiable and enthusiasm. Oh, and actually now that I realize, this is the first word is going to be an adjective, and the second word is going to be a noun. And part of what made me realize that is when I look at my answer choices, I can see that the second answer choice, all of the answer choices are nouns. And so I should have noticed that on the first time, but I didn't. I should have known actually that it was going to be a noun, because if you lack something, it's going to be lacking something like friendliness. So the first word's an adjective, the second word's going to be a noun. Okay. But that's actually a good point, because if you're on the fence of is the word supposed to be an adjective, a noun, or a verb, the answer choices will probably tell you what it's going to be. Okay, so amiable and enthusiasm works. So I have a reason for both of those. And distraught and cheeriness are definitely not similar, so that one's out. Okay. So then I would have it down to these two. Well, let's say I wasn't sure what the word predilection means. Well, I do know what enthusiasm and amiable mean. Actually, amiable is a hard word too. But if you knew that C is at least a decent fit, then you have a reason for letter C, and because you don't know what predilection means, you don't have a reason for or against it, so you pick C. And the word predilection actually means like an inclination. If you have a predilection for sports, it's actually a word that means basically preference. Okay. So this was a case where we knew something about the relationship of the two words, even though we didn't know exactly what the words were going to be. And we're going to have a similar situation here. Okay, once, meaning in the past, a blank gathering, the Greek festival has, in recent times, contrasting to the past, has become highly blank. So here, it's definitely going to be contrast words. And they're going to be words that are adjectives, because they're describing a gathering or a festival. And so we're looking for adjectives that could describe a festival that are going to be opposites. Okay, so urban and contemporary are not opposites, so that one's out. Religious and commercialized, you might have a hard time knowing what commercialized means. Let's say you didn't know what commercialized means, so then we wouldn't have any reason for or against letter B. Mournful and gloomy, those are similar words, so it's definitely not that one. And then parallel and transformed, well, you probably know what both of those words mean, and it doesn't make sense to describe a gathering as parallel. And also the word transformed doesn't mean the opposite of parallel, so that one doesn't work. So let's say in this case, and actually this is the first case that this has happened, let's say you didn't know what the word commercialized meant. Well, we already have reasons against A, C, and D, so we're going to pick B. We're not picking B because this word is fancy and probably is good because it's fancy. We're picking it because we had reasons against the other three, and if you didn't know what commercialized meant, you don't have a reason for it against it, and it's certainly possible that you could describe a Greek festival as religious. So the short and long of it is, when you have answer choices and there are some parts that have words that you don't know what they mean, the only thing you can do is base your answer on what you do know rather than trying to base it on what you don't know. Okay, last one. Okay, this is going to be a case where there are going to be words that you probably don't know, but we might be able to at least make some educated choices. All right, Dan never failed, meaning he was always able to, charm listeners with his blank stories. Well, if a person can charm their listeners with a certain kind of story, it's definitely going to be a positive word. And I can actually just say charming. I don't need to try to come up with a fancy word. So I'm looking for a word that's certainly a positive word that describes stories and possibly means charming. Okay. Well, when I was your age, I definitely didn't know what lethargic or wan meant. Engaging, I probably did know, and I know that engaging is positive, so I have a reason for it. I probably didn't know exactly what insufferable was, but it has this root word, suffer, and so I probably would have guessed that it was negative, and it actually is a negative word. It means something that can't be endured, so it's definitely a negative word. So in this case, I have a reason for letter D, I have some reason against letter C, and if I had no idea what these two words meant, I don't have any reason for them or against them, so I pick letter D. All right, so I've gone over a lot of stuff, but I hope that was helpful. See you later, alligator.